Hello everyone, Steinyamite here, back with another build video today. Hopefully everybody's doing good. We got a Valby build today. I think it's going to be a really good time. As you can see here in our background gameplay for the intro, we are showing off a Gluttony build. We're going to be going over 3 Valby builds today. We have one for mobbing, bossing, and then very specifically, Gluttony bossing. Gluttony is a little bit different when it comes to bossing. Valby actually has a red Transcendent mod to be used exclusively with Gluttony, so I thought it would be worth making a dedicated build, start helping people with that, you know, make everyone's lives a little bit easier when it comes to Gluttony, right? Everybody wants that easy clear, everybody wants to farm, so we got a couple really cool builds today. I think we're gonna have a blast, and let's get right into it. Alrighty, so coming over here to the inventory screen, we're gonna check out this build, right? As I said, we are doing an ultimate Valby build today. Valby, however you want to pronounce it, right? I've heard it both ways, so I'm sure you'll hear me pronounce it both ways in this video. I figured we'd start off just by showing weapons I like to use with these builds, as well as the external components and the reactor, right? So let's get started here with the reactor. I again am using one with Enduring Legacy. I particularly like Enduring Legacy for all of my Valby builds. I find that it is a very good gun, especially for bossing. So the big thing besides the mounting, since again, that is always a personal preference, is you want to be looking at ones that have non-attribute and then ones like a fusion skill power boost. Valby uses 2 types of skills. She has fusion and dimension. So really, at the end of the day, either one, it's kind of if you get one that you like that has fusion or dimension first, I would just say keep that, as they're both going to be really good. You don't normally have to use Valby's ability attacks in bosses and stuff like that, so it's not as big of a deal. You're using them to boost up other firearm attack, right? You're not using them always to damage the boss directly. So the ones I like in here are always going to be things like skill cost and then a skill power boost, right? There are a few other options, but this is the one that I'm currently rocking and I like it a lot. Now, as for the components, I'm rocking 2 different sets. I have the Annihilation set in a 2-stack, and I have the Bravery set. I like both of these because they both do give a lot of health and defense. The Bravery set, the 2 set gives HP recovery and max shield, which is super nice because especially for Gluttony, we're going to be messing with shield a lot. And then the Annihilation set just ups your skill duration. And for a character like Valby, that is really good for our mobbing and bossing builds. It's also really good for the Gluttony build because the ability that we use specifically for that boss is very useful to have a longer duration. So again, Annihilation and Bravery sets. Alrighty here. Moving right along to the builds here. We're going to start off with the Gluttony one since this is the one that I think I've spent the most time with, you know, I've played around with the most, right? Quickly here, we will show off all of the mod slots. We have them like this just because some of the other builds were using these, but for anyone who wanted a quick screenshot, that's how I have all the modules set up. Now, for Gluttony specifically, right? The big one here is this Transcendent mod that we're going to be using, Spiral Tidal Wave. Spiral Tidal Wave makes bubbles no longer bounce on the ground, and they are fired forward, and it attracts Gluttony's impurities. So again, this is a red mod, a Transcendent mod, made very specifically for the Gluttony boss fight. Therefore, we have made an entire build around it. As you'll be seeing in some background gameplay here, we use this ability a lot. It is tied to our 1 or our X ability, A, depending on what platform you're on. It hurls a water attack of Valby's that will grab all of the ice balls at Gluttony. It will attract all those impurities and it will send them flying straight at the boss. Super nice because then instead of having to shoot all of those as you normally would for the fight, you can now just throw those at him and you have to shoot them just to knock him in at the very end, but you don't have to move them across the entire stage, right? Super nice. Other mods here, we have midair maneuvering. Again, this is my personal favorite of the 3 grapples. You can use really any of them though. That one's really just personal preference. In a previous build we did for Bunny, I explained why this midair maneuvering is very useful, but that's more for Bunny specifically. Any other character you can really pick long distance, multi, midair, whatever you feel comfortable with, right? Okay. So Next, we're going to focus on our HP, right? So in total right now, this Valby build I have has just under 17,000 HP. We're sitting at 16,710. So to get that HP, you know, we're using a couple of those external components, but the first big one here is increased HP. Pretty standard mod. We're doubling down on that with HP amplification. Now, this is really important again because we talked about shield. With Valby, we're kind of stacking a lot of these shield things to help us get even more defense, right? Because as we see here, this build has about 75,000 defense. The goal is to be able to actually tank Gluttony's attacks. I'm sure there's many people who have fought the boss before, and he one-shots, maybe two-shots if you're lucky. It's not always what you want, right? You want to be able to have sustainability, especially if you are a Valby and you're trying to keep the boss from doing the instant wipe mechanic. So HP amplification, I find good. Get a lot of HP. We don't really need shield anyway because of how we're going to be manipulating shield. To tie into that, we're going to look at Iron Will next. When our shield's at 0, our defense goes up even further, right? Again, so we're trying to add as much defense as we can because we already have a lot of HP. About as much as we can as well with this build. If our shield already starts lower, because we're minusing 36% of it, makes it a little easier to get that defense boost. You know, pretty much you get hit once by a Gluttony attack, and then you just have that defense boost the entire time. Great. Now, in addition to that, again, we are trying to boost our defense even further. So I use shield conversion defense. This again does another minus 36.5% of our shield on top of this. So our max shield really starts to hit, right? Again, this is really important because if our shield is at 0, we get another defense boost. So the goal here was just to be getting as much HP and as much defense as possible while also trying to manipulate that shield. All kind of ties into each other, right? Fantastic. Other mods, pretty standard ones here, but I'll still quickly touch on them. Ones like skill extension. You know, our duration's really important. This spiral tidal wave is an attack that, again, hurls those ice balls a certain distance, and that is based upon your skill duration, so we want to have that really high. You know, a couple other common ones here: increased defense, skill expansion. The effect range is really nice, right? Skill expansion is really good because it will grab those ice balls in from a further distance, suck them toward the attack, throw them toward Gluttony. Always good. Next here we have time distribution. This is always good because we're trying to have skill cooldown and max HP. Felt like a really good no-brainer for this build. You know, we're trying to have as much health as possible. Gluttony hurts a lot. If we can throw those spiral tidal wave attacks more often, that's a good day. Right? Our goal is to be having maximum uptime. This Valby build focuses more on keeping the boss fight going, not so much you outputting maximum damage. Right? You can still do good damage. We will get to that build. But specifically on Gluttony, if you want to go that route, you can just get away with really focusing on keeping the fight alive for everyone. In addition to time distribution here, we have amplification control. Same idea, skill effect range and max shield, right? So since we had 2 minuses on the shield, we're bringing it back up. The real reason for this though wasn't necessarily, hey, I wanted more shield because, you know, we can use Iron Will to get it to 0, get more defense. But I wanted that skill effect range. Any range that we have on that is really, really good. Again, it can grab the ice crystals in from further away, propel them forward further. Awesome. Now, last mod I will go over for this Gluttony build here. This one specifically, I need to preface, shot focus is really good, not just for Gluttony, but really for the bossing build. The problem with this mod, this is one of, I believe, it's either 4 or 6 mods in the entire game that only come from fusing all the mods together, right? So when you go to the vendor in Albion and you talk to him and you try to combine modules, this is one of those modules that you can only get by combining. The best way to do it that I had found was get a bunch of the cerulean mods here, Cs, that are rare tier, ideally Descendant mods, not weapon mods, and just keep combining any 4 of them together, trying to get shot focus. So, moving on to what it does. Skill power modifier, minus 15. That's not a big deal because we're not trying to damage the boss with our skills in the first place. We're trying to use them to get the mechanic that's going to, you know, interact with him. But the big thing is you just get a 15% boost to firearm attack. We will see this mod again in bossing. It's a little more important in the bossing build, but that is the Gluttony build. Next up here, we have our bossing build, right? Let's get straight into it. Again, give everybody that moment to screenshot. You've seen the modules before, but just in case you need them again, if you're just skipping straight to this part of the video, no worries at all. Now, let's get into our bossing build. So, the first big one here is Supply Moisture. We're going to be using 3 different Transcendent mods for 3 different builds. Supply Moisture is one of the coolest ones for bossing, really cool for Valby, right? So what happens is while on water, which is her skills, it increases firearm critical hit rate, skill critical hit rate, skill duration, and firearm attribute trigger rate. It also reduces the MP consumption. Or I guess, no, they changed that, so the reduction of MP consumption does not apply. Used to, at least from what I can remember. So, the big one of those, as we read, was the firearm critical hit rate. When standing on water, so when casting any of these attacks, normally I would just recommend doing the 1 or the 2 attack. The 3 can take a little bit of time. It's a little better for mobbing. So 1 and 2, just make some water, stand in the water, or any water that might be on a stage. If you're doing this outside of a boss, still applies to any real water in the game. It increases your firearm critical hit rate. Awesome. That's really good for something like Enduring Legacy, where it's a slow moving gun anyway because you're using a machine gun, so your movement speed is slowed. Works great. Again, that whole idea is we're trying to have a lot of defense and health for this. That way we can stand there, really tank those hits. The rest of this build, let's get into it, right? For the bossing, since we have a little bit less health here, we're rocking just under 11,000 this time, 10,796. Defense is 46,174. Again, a little lower than the Gluttony build, but most bosses don't hurt the same way as Gluttony, in my experience in testing. So, I like HP Collector. I find it really nice whenever there's just the mobs out during the boss fight. You know, you kill an enemy, you can get a little health back. You don't always have to rely on that health drop on the ground. Really, really nice, right? Just a passive thing. Got to get rid of those mobs anyway. Always be a good team player with it, and you get health back most of the time. Awesome. So, moving on to the rest of these then. There are a couple that are pretty standard here again, like we have increased defense, skill extension from the last one. You know, skill extension I would say is a little more important here, just because you're trying to stand on that water. So the longer it lasts, the less often you have to reapply that buff on the ground to get Supply Moisture working. Always good. We then have things like our Stim Accelerant, that's max HP, minus MP. It's a very minor MP hit. There's a few other health mods that you can swap out with this. This was just the one that I was willing to use because I was like, you know, I'd rather have a little bit of shield, a little bit less MP. That's all. Again, here we have shot focus as we discussed. But if this is your first time here in this video and you skipped over the Gluttony part, that's okay. The one thing I want to touch on again with shot focus is one of a few mods in the game that you can only get by combining modules, right? It's a very good mod because it just boosts your firearm attack by 15%. We're trying to stack back into just the crit rate with Supply Moisture. The best way, again, I would say to go after shot focus is it is a C mod, a cerulean. I would try to find 4 rare ones. You can farm any of them. Ideally, you want the Descendant ones, not weapon mods. Any 4 will do in the rare tier, and just keep combining. It takes a little bit of luck, but, you know, fingers crossed, right? So moving on from those, let's go into time distribution. This is always good. We have skill cooldown, right? We want this to last as long as possible. We're trying to stand on our water to do damage to bosses. So when our cooldown's faster, it means it overlaps, means we, in theory, as long as we have any MP, should never be without our water. Also gives you a nice little bump to HP. Awesome. Right, then we have skill expansion. Skill effect range plus 92%. This is really, really good because it just gives you more area to stand on to get Supply Moisture to activate, right? Especially if you use your 2 attack like this, you can make a very large water spot, especially if you kind of place it almost on top of each other. You know, just kind of like maybe a 50-50 overlap. And this will just expand that range even further. So you have a very large area that you can strafe in. That way you don't take as much damage, but you can still keep Supply Moisture working. Next, we're going to go to Nimble Fingers. Same idea here as we had with time distribution. We're going for a skill cooldown. The goal is to never really be without water. Great. Next, we have Amplification Control. Skill effect range, you know, we're trying to pull into skill expansion again. This is also just a nice little bump because we get 36% more shield. That was again the whole thing of why I chose Stim Accelerant. I wasn't trying to up the shield and down the shield at the same time. I'd rather take a very slight hit to MP and have a little more resistance with our shields. Awesome. Last mod here that we need to touch on is Frugal Mindset. Just reduces skill cost. Really, really good. You know, gives us more MP total to work with than in our MP pool, so we can use water more than once, obviously, and keep that uptime going. This is also just a nice added bonus here. You get another 22% of skill effect range. Those are tying into expansion and amplification control. So you have a very large area of effect whenever you cast any of Valby's attacks, right? And in the background gameplay here, you're going to see supply moisture being used. You're going to see how to use it. It's a pretty easy setup since you can really activate it anywhere. And you kind of get to control the pace of how you want to use that, right? It's not, oh, I have to stand this distance from a boss to make sure it hits. As long as you're in an effective weapon range, you can pretty much proc this however, whenever you want. Awesome. Now, let's move on to that mobbing build. Last up here, we have our mobbing build. Again, we are using a specific Transcendent mod different from the bossing and gluttony one. This is another really fun one. I like this one. I think the mobbing build is a blast. So let's get right into it here. We'll leave that screenshot up for a second. If you are skipping directly to the mobbing part of this video, that's quite all right. Here are all of the module slots and everything that we have like that, right? As you'll see, some of them have the multi-slot because other builds in here, the bossing and the gluttony build, are using some different mod slots. That's a great thing that we have now, though. So let's keep it going. So first up here, we're going to talk about the Transcendent mod. Hydro Pressure Bomb. Leaps forward, creating a puddle, deals damage to the surrounding enemies on landing. The more enemies with laundry, the more damage inflicted. So this replaces our 2 attack or our circle or our B, depending on the platform. As you can see here, this mod is a little bit different from before, where her standard 2 attack, she will sink under the water and make a puddle forward, right? This one is quicker. I think it's a lot better for mobbing specifically. As you see, she does a leap forward. It makes a water puddle where she starts and where she smacks. But it takes out some of the transition time. I think it keeps the gameplay a little more fluid, especially when you're trying to do ability spam with her. Moving on from that, right? We have some mods that we've seen already in the other parts of this build, but we'll go over them anyway. So specifically for our mobbing build, I am sitting at 17,732 defense and 12,315 for health, right? Health has been fairly consistent across the board between 10 and 16,000. Defense has been a little more all over the place because we're trying to min-max depending on what we're doing, right? Things like Gluttony, we had over 70k. We're trying to really hold resistance and we had as high HP as possible. Things like bossing and mobbing, you need less usually. If you want to ever change any of those mods out and do your own testing, hey, feel free, right? So let's get right into this. We'll start with our non-attribute specialist. This is just non-attribute skill power since Valby is a non-attribute character. So this just boosts it by 81%. So all 4 of these attacks just get boosts, right? Next, we have Enlightenment. This just gives us an extra 15% of our max MP usage. This is always good, just because then we have an opportunity to continue spamming. Awesome. Next, we have Energy Collection. This is just MP recovery plus 57%. That is whenever you pick up any of the blue MP boxes on the ground. Now, something to note here with Energy Collection, you can switch this out for another mod. There is MP Plunder here, or not Plunder, I'm so sorry. MP Collector, taking up the same slot. You don't need another crystallization catalyst for this. MP Collector, I love a lot as well. I just personally felt like with all the movement that Valby has, that we'll get into with how we want to do the uptime for our abilities, I liked Energy Collection. I felt like it just restored my max MP almost every time I picked up a box. However, MP Collector is really cool. When defeating an enemy, instantly recovers 12% of max MP at 17% chance. That is, every time we kill an enemy though. So if we're killing large hordes of them by leaving our water trails or throwing the hydro pressure bomb at them, it can just grant you a big chunk of your MP back, right? always a really good thing. That one, I would say at the end of the day here, between MP collector and energy collection, it's really about your preference here. Both work, and again, it's super nice just because you can interchange these mods super easily. So moving on here to the next mods, we have Nimble Fingers. Skill cooldown 25%. This is always good because if it's a mobbing build, we're generally relying on more ability uptime and ability spam. So any way to have cooldown so that it overlaps and we can hit those attacks more often, it's always a plus. Next, we have Maximize Range. This one, even though there is that skill power modifier at -20, you know, it might hurt a little bit, but there's so many other mods at play here boosting up all of the attacks anyway. It really goes unnoticed at the end. The big thing is the skill effect range is plus 94%. That is massive, especially when we're tying it into things again like Hydro Pressure Bomb. I will show some gameplay here, but when we are using Hydro Pressure Bomb, it's a much larger radius that we can attack enemies, right? Always good. Another standard one here, increased HP. Like I said, this is just, you know, I would say you want HP or defense if you play with one more than the other. A lot of times with mobbing builds, you really want to have a balanced scale, so you want the numbers for HP and defense to be around the same area from each other. Moving on, we have Enlightenment. This is just a max MP boost. Awesome there. Next, we have Skill Insight, which is just skill critical hit rate, plus 115, right? We're trying to stack these on skill powers like non-attribute. Next here, we have Emergency Measures. These I love. I think these are really fun mods. This is the skill critical hit rate up and skill critical hit damage up, right? There is another mod that goes in tandem with this a lot of times called Frontline. It's just the same thing in reverse. So it'll give a bigger boost to skill crit damage and a smaller boost to skill crit hit rate. Awesome. Next here we have Skill Extension. Skill duration is always nice to have just because, again, if it's a mobbing build and Valby has a lot of AoE and lingering damage, the longer that sits on the ground, the more damage you do to enemies, the less MP you have to spend. Great. Last one here, Battle of Stamina. I chose this over any of the other ones like HP Amplification or any of those, just because even though it's a smaller boost to HP, being around 120% as opposed to over 200%, I do like that plus 8% skill duration. I know 8% might not seem like a lot, but when you start to add it up over time, every little bit matters. So if you see here on the left, our skill duration in total is over a 45% increase. So every little bit starts to add up, right? The goal is to have all of Valby's attacks lingering on the ground as long as possible. Last thing I want to show off here in today's video is we are over here in the laboratory, the testing chambers, if you will. I just want to show off a little more of the mobbing build, right? We showed off some gameplay footage of bossing and Gluttony bossing. Those are a little harder to show in something here like the laboratory, but something like the mobbing build can benefit a lot from here as opposed to just taking it to an outpost, right? We can get some more accurate numbers, see really what's going on. So let's take a look here. We're going to start by showing off the Descendant mod. This is Hydro Pressure Bomb. This is our circle attack here for console. B if you're on Xbox, and just whatever you might have it mapped as, but it's the 2 on a PC. So this is our attack. We are hitting for over 500,000 on a crit. These do not leave as large of a linger, but that's okay. Just because it's doing more damage in turn, right? So she leaps through the air, does a lot of damage to every enemy. Exactly what we want to see. Now, in addition to that, while you're letting those attacks cool down with Valby, again, she's AoE and has a lot of linger. So we're really trying to spam the 1, 2, and 3 attacks specifically. 4 is still very nice. The laundry cannon. Is it necessary? Not all the time. It's very useful, you know. I mean, it will do damage. It'll clump ads up for you. You can use it in tandem with some of these other things, but I don't personally find myself turning that one on as often. That's okay though. So as far as the other attacks go, the standard 1 attack here just makes a big water pool. Again, this is our skill extension here, making that difference, right? Lingers a very long time. We have our expansion mods increasing the range, as well as that maximize range mod we talked about. Just from this water droplet alone, there is a large AoE. And then when the ads are there, do that. Always try to be using Hydro Pressure Bomb and the first attack in tandem. And then while all of that's happening, you can always be in Valby's third attack, right? This is the attack that allows her to move around the stage, clean up, right? Puts her in a liquefied state. These are where things like our duration and cooldown come in handy because we're trying to have the maximum uptime, right? So we draw circles like that. I usually try to throw the first attack in there. And then while they're all in here anyway, that's when you can start doing Hydro Pressure, right? The goal is really to try and be cycling out this 1, 2, and 3 attack as much as you can, right? And as you see, usually there is a good amount of overlap. The MP is a pretty minimal hit. You do get a lot of uptime with this mobbing build. As far as weapons go, you can really use whatever you want if you want to use a weapon in tandem with these, just personal preference. But if you're just going for ability spam alone, as you can see, you get quite a lot of uptime, quite a lot of damage. Just from these damage ticks on the ground, we're seeing upwards of just over 70,000 for any enemy standing in any of Valby's water. So yeah, this is all of the mobbing. Again, we showed off the rest earlier in the video. But yeah, thank you all very much for watching. Hopefully had a good time here today, right? Hopefully I was able to help you learn something here, help you better your build. Ultimate Valby is a very fun character. She's one of my favorites. Valby was the first character that I wanted to play as ever since the beta, so she has not let me down ever since. But again, I want to thank you all for watching. Thank you all for sticking around in today's video, and I will see you all in the next one. Peace.